The late 20th century bore witness to a headlong and furious race to commercialize genetic engineering. Companies engaged in profound experiments, greater than anything before in human history, promising a scientific revolution that would reshape every facet of life. At the forefront of this race stood International Genetics Incorporated. InGen, itself the product of a shared dream of Dr. John Hammond and Sir Benjamin Lockwood, each inspired and moved by the boundless possibilities genetic engineering offered. From its earliest days, InGen pioneered breakthroughs, peddled consumer goods, and bioengineered animals as if it was nothing. It didn't take the company long to become a leader in their field, and with such successes the company grew immeasurably from their basement laboratory in the Lockwood estate. They established a new corporate office in Palo Alto, and soon thereafter numerous offices and labs opened across Europe. Hammond, always grandiose in vision, grew increasingly fascinated by the concept of de-extinction, the notion of restoring to the world creatures long gone. He would be inspired by the work of Dr. Laura Sorkin, who successfully extracted ancient DNA from amber inclusions, and seeing the potential of her work, and fearful of corporate espionage, InGen negotiated with the Costa Rican government to acquire the isolated Muertes archipelago, and established upon Isla Sorna a research complex to tackle the task of de-extinction. Their efforts were hastened by the addition of a Dr. Henry Wu, whose process of substituting compatible and functionally identical DNA from modern animals increased the rate at which viable embryos were produced. Through combined efforts, the ancient genome of a number of species was unlocked. Backed with InGen's records of technological breakthroughs and his own indomitable charisma, Hammond amassed investors, with a promise that they would be in on InGen's grandest of undertakings. Soon thereafter, construction began on a vast amphitheater in San Diego. This theater was to serve as the centerpiece of a burgeoning complex, part zoo, part theme park. A complex to be known as Jurassic Park. Construction thereafter slowed and eventually stopped as Hammond developed a grander vision for the project. Building upon his past relations with the Costa Rican government, Hammond negotiated the inclusion of Isla Nublar to InGen's existing agreements, promising to relocate the island's indigenous population, promising them homes, schools, and hospitals. All they would receive were empty words. But with the population cleared, construction could begin. Understanding the potential for dangers to the public, InGen invested in the most sophisticated security system they could, custom-coded it with near-total automation of systems across the island. Paddocks were reinforced with concrete and steel barriers, supplemented with electrified fencing, all to be overseen by an experienced park warden. The park on opening was to have 13 animal species on display alongside more traditional attractions and amenities, with more due to come online during subsequent phases of development. Concerns were raised among the corporate board, first with the departure of Benjamin Lockwood, who cited disagreements over the potential use of genetic engineering, and then with the mauling and death of an employee by one of the park's attractions. This concern prompted the board of directors to bring in outside experts to evaluate, inspect, and ultimately to provide their endorsement to the park. In the midst of the experts' tour, as a tropical storm made landfall, sabotage caused a near-total shutdown of the park's security systems. Dinosaurs broke free of their containment, and staff and visitors alike were forced into a battle of survival. Within hours, the project was deemed irrecoverable and abandoned. In the immediate aftermath, InGen went into overdrive, desperate to keep the incident quiet, settling lawsuits, paying off media outlets, and vigorously enforcing its non-disclosure agreements. The company teetered on the brink of collapse. Hammond, changed by the events on the island, grew increasingly neglectful of his duties as CEO. In his growing absence, his nephew and chairman of the board of directors, Peter Ludlow, took charge of the company. Practicing frugality, closing operations on Isla Sorna, implementing a pragmatic market strategy, and focusing on the less ambitious application of the company's work, Ludlow pulled the company back from the brink of ruin. Even with such budgetary constraints, Dr. Wu and his genetics team continued to make breakthroughs, the most publicized being the creation of a new genus of flower, a true hybrid constructed from numerous plants, dubbed Caracosis wutansis. Perhaps inspired by the company's continued potential, or perhaps unwilling to take a complete loss on their investments, Ludlow drew up plans to finish the partially constructed facility in San Diego and to mount an expedition to reclaim their lost assets. Such plans were opposed by Hammond, and in his defiance he was forced from office, formally cementing Ludlow as CEO. Even so, Hammond would utilize his own resources to dispatch his own team to Isla Sorna. In their inevitable conflict, InGen lost much in the way of material, lives, and many of the collected assets. For all their efforts, they managed to capture and transport a Tyrannosaurus buck and its offspring to San Diego. Through an emergency in transit, their efforts at containing the elder dinosaur failed, and it was unleashed upon San Diego, rampaging across the city's docks and surrounding suburbs. Though the dinosaur was quickly captured and returned to Isla Sorna, Ludlow's death during the incident, combined with emerging pressures to regulate bioengineering, would have been the death knell of InGen, if not for one Simon Masrani, whom, with the blessing of John Hammond, moved to buy the company. InGen's genetic division, once the pride and joy of the company, had been effectively neutered by the newly created Gene Guard Act, which forbade further research or cloning of extinct life. Further, it placed upon InGen the legal responsibility to protect their creations. Effectively, InGen was reduced to studying their own creations. Even so, under Henry Wu's management, the division developed the most comprehensive genetic library on the planet. Their security division, legally obligated to protect their former assets and prevent their proliferation across the planet, blossomed, working in conjunction with the Costa Rican government and the United Nations to stop emergent poaching and ecotourism on the islands. Supported by Masrani Global, the division was supplied with state-of-the-art unmanned drones, the latest weaponry, and backed by the most advanced cybersecurity available. When a pack of pteranodons were wrangled in Canada under American contractor Vic Hoskins, the security division found its own visionary leader and grew into a globe-spanning peacekeeping force. Masrani, not content with a mere acquisition of InGen, used his global connections to restore access to the company's former holdings in Costa Rica, and despite allegations of illegal cloning operations in the early 2000s, InGen and Masrani's latest subsidiary, Medixal Health, successfully lobbied Congress to loosen the restrictions of the Gene Guard Act. With the last major obstacle stripped away, InGen geneticists set to work improving upon their old creations, while simultaneously bringing new species to fruition. InGen security was deployed en masse to Isla Nublar in a grand pacification campaign. In their wake, numerous Masrani subsidiaries were deployed. Hammond's and Masrani's visions mixed as a new park began to take form. The project, an immeasurable source of innumerable problems, became a source of innovation. New fields, methodologies, technologies, tools, and polymers were created as the company's brightest minds were brought to bear. Masrani took all due steps to shield the activity on the island from the world at large. Even so, rumors and allegations circulated. Tales of the death of interns, allegations of leaked drone footage, and leaked patent office forms. But otherwise, the world was left in the dark until 2005, when Simon Masrani unveiled to the public for the first time Jurassic World. Opening with some 8 species, numerous corporate sponsorships, and all the comforts of home. Designed as an educational and entertainment park melded with a vast research facility. By all accounts, it opened to immense success, serving almost 100,000 guests in their first month of operations. Invariably, as the public became acquainted with the park's assets, its attractions, they began to lose their luster, and though perhaps exotic, they became otherwise mundane. Jurassic World was forced to continue to innovate and to introduce new assets, all of which pushed up the year-to-year cost of operations. Faced with what could rapidly become a looming financial crisis, the company looked for opportunities to revitalize public interests, with a number of programs being introduced. Everything from increasing corporate sponsorships, building a child's vacation adventure camp, to introducing a program to train raptors to follow human orders. Yet none of them captured the imagination of the board of directors, or of Simon Masrani like Dr. Wu's proposal to take the next step in genetic engineering, and produce an entirely new species. Wu's early efforts at hybridization were deemed unsuitable for display, yet in their failure they laid the foundation for future successes. By 2015, Henry Wu's latest effort was deemed such a success. Reports of this new creation sent ticket sales skyrocketing. Corporate sponsors were arranged and every effort was underway to unveil InGen's latest triumph to the world. Living up to its name, the Indominus Rex breached containment, showing an unparalleled aggression and previously unseen abilities. Asset containment and park security were ill-prepared to deal with the creature. Efforts by InGen security to utilize raptors to rein in the situation failed catastrophically and only added to the dead. The chaos at the park could not be contained. Countless deaths, countless private recordings, the death of Simon Masrani, Vic Hoskins, and the disappearance of Dr. Wu. InGen effectively ceased to exist. Masrani Global and each of its subsidiaries were left reeling, each seeking to distance themselves from the disaster. The fate of their creations became a matter of public debate. Once more, dinosaurs faced extinction, their very existence deemed a threat to humanity's survival. The governments of the world chose not to intervene. But life finds a way. Whether by human greed or efforts to make amends for past failings, their creations spread. For there are those who have long waited to stand upon the shoulders of giants, looking to profit in InGen's failure.